Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow, and perhaps even check out our Patreon. Today we're going to be doing something that we've not done before because we're going to be revisiting an engine that we previously reviewed. And the engine in question is this little thing here that was sent to me by my friends across the sea. Now, when I reviewed this the first time round, I wasn't really that complimentary of it. I mean, this is stunning. It really is a stunning model. It's great, but it's too greatly flawed for the money you have to pay for it. And that's genuinely disappointing. So, a quick recap. This is a Ryder Erickson hot air engine. You have a little burner down here, and this heats up this tube here. It is a sealed system, so the air in here doesn't go anywhere. It's stuck inside this thing. There is a big displacement piston inside this bit here. And as the motion goes round, that will move the displacement piston up and down, which will displace the air from the hot end here up to the cold end here. This hot air coming up here has energy and forces this piston here up. As it comes up, it brings the big displacement piston up with it, which displaces this air, which is now becoming cold because it's at the cold end, out of the way. The cold air creates a vacuum, which draws this one back down, and then the cold air is displaced to the hot end, gets hot, and the whole thing goes over again. It's quite simple and quite beautiful. Now obviously we're heating this bit of metal here, so eventually it's all going to get hot. And this relies on this bit down here being hot and this bit up here being cold. And so if this all becomes hot, the hot air engine doesn't work. So this one is fitted with a little pump here. So every time the motion goes up and down, it will then help pull water through into this water jacket around the edge to keep the top end up here cold. So what were the issues with this, I hear you cry, having not watched the video? Now, if you do want to watch the video on this, I suggest clicking over there somewhere and that will take you through to the review of it. But basically, this thing ran too fast. It ran so fast that it had the habit of just self-destructing. The pin here that holds the flywheel onto the shaft would come out, so the flywheel would spin and the whole engine would stop because it needs that inertia from the flywheel to continue running. The little tiny screws on the top of the piston would come loose and launch themselves into the stratosphere, and that I actually cannot believe when they launched off that I managed to find them again because they are almost microscopic. They are hard to see with the naked eye. The little water pump on the front here, the gland of that pulled out because the nut just gently released itself until the gland came out. And finally, and most worryingly of all, I had a flame out from the control valve here for the gas, which for somebody who doesn't deal with gas, I found to be quite terrifying. So you may be saying, well, Lawrie, with all these faults, why are you coming back to it again? Well, my good friend Tom recently came to stay when we took the fire engine out on the road run. And whilst he was here in the evening, we were looking at my collection of hot air and steam engines and decided to have ourselves a little running session. We fired up the flame licker, which ran flawlessly, and then Tom said, well, what about this one? To which I said, oh, Tom, no, this thing doesn't work very well. All it is now is a very nice display piece. And he went, well, shall we give it a try? And so I went, sure, why not? I'll show you what's wrong with it. And in doing this, with a bit more experience under my belt and having chatted to people about gas-powered models, I found actually that a lot of the faults with it were user error. So today I'm here to give this thing a new chance and take you through some of the things that I've learnt and perhaps maybe change your mind on it, and also show that I was wrong the first time round, because how we've got it run now actually is pretty good. So with that, let's go and get some prep done and get the thing working. First off, you will need a canister of gas. I'm using a butane-propane mix, although apparently propane on its own is actually the more desirable fuel because it's got less energy in it, rather than butane, which has got too much energy for running something like this. To use your gas bottle, you'll need an adapter like this. For this particular engine, it needs to have this long neck here, otherwise the gas bottle itself gets in the way of the engine and you can't fill it. This goes on and screws on like so. And then this goes downwards into this hole, and then you push down to fill with gas. And with this came my first mistake and crux of quite a few of my issues. You see, there is no way to know how full that tank is. And the way that you're meant to fill one of these models is with a quick pshk. You do that and put a little bit of gas in. How I was doing it was with a prolonged push down and overpressuring the little system. The leak that I had there was I literally forced too much gas into the cylinder, and so it was venting it. It was coming out of the tap because it literally isn't designed to take that pressure. You'll know if you've overpressured it, because if you open this up, that was the sound of gas rushing out from the tap, and if one was to light this model, it wouldn't take long before the gas rushing out of the tap also caught fire, which for those of us who aren't particularly versed in gas is quite alarming. The thing to take from gas is it's very unlikely to do the big boom thing. What it will do is just burn like a torch. And although I know that, in the back of my head it's still like, it's going to explode. So the first thing is, it's not going to explode, it just might be fiery. So, having learnt that, and having put the correct amount of gas in, which I stress is just a single tsk, it didn't mention this at all in the instructions, but it just needs a little bit of gas. And then we're ready to go on to the next stage. It's time to add a couple of drops of super thin oil into the little holes here and here, which will lubricate the cross shaft. And then there's a tiny lubricator on top here, and that will drop oil down into the slide here to keep that nicely lubricated. Also put just a bead of oil with this nice thin oil on these moving parts here, here and here. And just across the rear mechanism here, on the pump, and just on the side of the main cylinder. Next we get some distilled water and we add it to the tank here. Now the reason I'm using this alcohol dispenser from one of my other engines will come apparent later, but it's actually really useful for running this engine, so something with a tiny top like this is pretty good. Then it's time to get our source of ignition and light. The way we do it is we take our lit flame into the burner, turn on the gas jet, and we have ignition. Next we take this tiny screw lid off, put our little pipette in and take a little bit of water from the tank. And then we add some water into the filler here for the pump. Turn it over until we have water running out. With the system primed, we have to replace the lid like so. Teeny tiny. And then shoot the rest of the water back into the tank. And as the engine's been heating up throughout all this process, it's now ready to run. Now you'll notice again, it's speeding up and starting to run very, very fast. This is the speed of which it will start to decimate and undo all of these bits around here. And in truth, I had to tighten up these earlier because they'd worked loose. I believe all my problems come down to this thing here. You see, this is a fire hole door, of which I kept open previously so I could see the flame when I turned it down to absolute minimum on the gas. But as a fireman, I should know that this is allowing a lot of extra oxygen into the flame, thus making the flame burn more and hotter. If we shut this door and put the little latch down as intended, and now we ask the machine to work, we find that the machine runs at a much more acceptable speed. This isn't running away, this is just a good, relatively fast, but not a stupid tick over. And to demonstrate, if we just open this up, you can hear the pitch of the engine increase. And this returns to a similar rapid speed that it had done before, although with less gas inside the tank itself, it's not forcing it through with such ferocity, which means the flame isn't quite as large, thus less heat. Shut that back down. Now admittedly, I was slightly disappointed with this. Whilst it was definitely running slower now I was using the burner correctly, I thought I'd got it to run slower when I was using it with Tom. So I poked around with it for a bit longer and ran it for a few more times. And then I came across a absolutely stunning revelation. Normally for a hot air engine, efficiency is the name of the game, and trying to keep that cool to make the difference between the hot end and the cold end great is where you get your energy. However, now we've run this several times, all of this is getting hot, and in fact the water coming out of this is now actually very hot. So that means that the energy differential between the cold end and the hot end is less. So for this machine to run well, what you need it to be is less efficient, which means that you need the cold end to start to get hot. Not too hot because it will stop running, but a little hot. And running this with a tank of hot water. Yes, I know that's completely counterintuitive and against everything we know of a hot air engine, but as this thing runs so well, making it less efficient so it's extracting less energy from the hot air means that it will run over more slowly and be a more pleasant thing to watch. And so when you have warm water or hot water in the tank, it's actually really quite good. So there we go, a revisit to this tiny machine. The big question is it actually a good model, and was I wrong? Well, yes and no. I was doing things wrong with this. I was putting too much gas in this, and that gave me my problems with the leak of gas here, and a lot of the problems with overrun it by allowing too much oxygen in it, meaning it ran too fast. It is, however, not without its flaws. The pipe here is easily knocked off, and so you have a gas leak, and full disclosure, through shooting this video, I have had to tighten up a couple of extra bolts on it and little screws on it to make sure that it all stays together. So it's not as bad as I said it was. It actually, when you get it hot, particularly if you fill this up with warm or even hot water to make it less efficient, which seems a really daft thing to look to do to make it less efficient, it runs quite nicely. It ticks over at a decent rate. It's still fairly fast. It's not going to be a slow engine, but it runs fine. So what it essentially boils down to is it's actually been made too well. It's too efficient for its own good. It runs far too well, far too fast to the speeds of which it will, well, do a rapid unscheduled disassembly, which means it's not really built to the highest quality to take the forces that the model can make, but it is very efficient. And I've really enjoyed running it. I've had so much fun getting it to actually work and have something that's not useless. The biggest thing about this, although it's still fast, although it's still not perfect, this is no longer relegated to just sitting on the shelf. This is something that I will fire up from time to time and give it a good run. I think it would also be improved if I don't use the butane-propane mix and just use propane, because it's lower energy and the flame will be less powerful. And perhaps we could do something to this to make it run slower in a future video. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see that, if we have an idea of what we could do to this to make it run in a more enjoyable. I want to see it tick over slowly. And I have got an idea. All in all, it's actually half decent. There's a link in the video description. You know what? I'd actually say maybe go out and buy one yourself and have a go with it, because it's a lovely thing, it ticks over lovely, and I'd love to see some photos if you manage to make it work better, or maybe get it to drive something. The biggest problem with the hot air engine is there is next to no power to it, so when it's running, that's lovely, but getting it to actually drive something, well, that's more of an issue. But still, have a look yourself, maybe get one and see what you can do with it. And with that, thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this, how about clicking over there for the video where we actually reviewed it, and down there for one of the other mini engines we've done. And with that, well, I'm actually going to run it again because it's a hot air engine. Don't need to refill the water. I just need to put some more gas in it, light the flame, and we'll go again. So with that, we'll see you next time. Ta-da!